So, Hozer, in the last live stream about the invasion of Ukraine, we took up the topic of no-fly zones, and we sort of dealt with it in passing. And in the comments since that live stream, there have been a number of folks who've asked for a deeper dive into no-fly zones. So we thought we'd tackle that in this episode.
All right. Well, great to be with you again.
Great to be with you as always, my good friend. So let's talk about some of what you mentioned during the live stream about how we have to have, for starters, local air superiority before we can execute a no-fly zone. And generally that comes post-conflict.
You and I and aviators of our generation in the 1990s spent a lot of time patrolling no-fly zones. And the first one that comes to mind is Operation Southern Watch over southern Iraq. There were other no-fly zones in the 90s, but Southern Watch was probably the biggest, the longest lasting. Southern Watch came about after the 1991 Safwan truce, and it wasn't really at the end of that truce in the spring of 1991. The Iraqis, they had a truce, they had to abide by it. They did not. They broke the truce all the time. And it got to the point that in August of 92, the coalition imposed a no-fly zone on southern Iraq because the Iraqis had been using their helicopters to persecute the Shiite minority in South Iraq. And so Southern Watch lasted really until 2003. The other major no-fly zone that was established right at the end of the 1991 Gulf War was Provide Comfort in northern Iraq, and to help the Kurdish population that again was being persecuted by Saddam Hussein in northern Iraq. So there was a line of latitude that they could not fly aircraft above. And then the third one is deny flight in the mid 1990s, and this was in Bosnia. Remember when Bosnia was a thing, and there a conflict had occurred on the ground. It was still occurring, but NATO had imposed a no-fly zone. Okay, you guys, you can't fly aircraft, although they did. But we and Air Force and Marines patrolled the Bosnia region for I'd say about 6 years, really. From 93 to 99 when there was combat again. But so in each of those situations, a conflict had to occur before a no-fly zone could be imposed. The conflict that is occurring today over Ukraine, people say, well, let's just do a no-fly zone because that kind of worked in the 90s and that was good. But people don't know what a no-fly zone entails. So again, if we were to impose a no-fly zone today over Iraq, that would be active combat. A war has to occur first, and then a party comes in, maybe a powerful third party, to impose a no-fly zone.
So let's just say we decide, okay, we want to do a no-fly zone in Ukraine. So is the mission to prevent Russian airplanes from entering Ukrainian airspace? Immediately, we have the potential for U.S. on Russian activity. What happens if the Russians shoot down an American airplane with an S-400 SAM that's located on Russian soil, which they can reach out and touch, a cap station over Ukraine? And what happens if an American F-15 shoots down an Su-27, a Russian Su-27? Now what? We have to sort of be okay with the idea that there will be first world on first world activity. And already that escalates the current conflict to a level that's maybe unacceptable, right away. So the other no-fly zone, just, you laid out three: Northern Watch, Southern Watch, deny flight. Let's not forget the no-fly zone we had over Libya. That was basically some Marine Corps amphibs and some other NATO assets. At the fall of Gaddafi, we had a no-fly zone that was effective. The capability of the Libyans does not rival the capability of the Russians. Let's go over the mechanics of a no-fly zone. First, you got to have a joint task force, and that has to be headquartered somewhere. Vincenza, some other, maybe somewhere in Poland, Romania. Maybe you could even do it aboard the Harry S. Truman in the Adriatic. You could have the Joint Task Force. You've got to have airborne early warning in the form of an AWACS or an E2 all the time. You've got to have local air superiority created by a post-conflict rollback of integrated air defenses. So there is no SAM threat. Or you have to have with you suppression of enemy air defenses, what we called either SEAD or SEED. In these days, that would be a growler. In our days, that was a prowler that you had to have in company to take out a pop-up SAM threat. And in southern Iraq, that was generally an SA-6. And in Bosnia, that's how Scott O'Grady got shot down in 1994. It's the mobile SAMs you got to watch out for. So in the case of Ukraine, let's say we're getting tickled, meaning our raw gear is lighting up because an S-400 is illuminating us from sovereign Russia. Okay, now what's the ROE at that point? Now, if it was southern Iraq and you could first radiate, and then if they target you, then you can shoot an anti-radiation missile at that site. That was the ROE. So what do we think it would be in terms of Russia? Just soft kills kind of thing?
A tough problem. And yes, we spent a lot of time on ROE. If this happens, this is what you were expected to do, how you're expected to respond. And it might be just go away, just withdraw. But you may not be able to, and you may have to, what we call, honor the threat. That's right. If there's going to be a active SAM system that can see you and touch you, and it's in the sovereign territory, then you're flying over this contested area. I'm not sure how that would be addressed, but it certainly would be.
So if you were forward leaning, because I think we've already answered the question, why no fly zone, by saying, well, if your ROE says if you get illuminated by an S-400, withdraw, well, that's not much of a no-fly zone. Because I think that same logic would apply that if a Russian tactical aircraft lights you up, withdraw. Same, it seems like. So let's just suggest that this matrix would be answered beforehand. And in this world we're talking about, we're willing to engage, a la Southern Watch. In fact, one of the scenarios that we did there that was pretty guts ball was the U-2 protection. And this is where the Tomcat particularly was tasked with using a Phoenix missile. In fact, here's a picture of me manning up while the Orties put a Phoenix missile on the airplane before a Southern Watch Hob. But this was a time distance problem that was really tricky because Iraqis had MiG-25s, super fast airplanes. We can't go north of the 33rd parallel without breaking the UN charter. So we had to figure out, okay, missile time of flight, range, got to be able to hit the MiG-25 and not go north of the 33rd before they take down the UN U-2 that's flying at 70 or 80,000 feet. So that was a real tricky problem. But we had absolute mandate to take down Iraqi forces under the umbrella of Operation Southern Watch. And Iraq is not Russia. So if we were to shoot down an Iraqi MiG-25, it's not going to start World War III. Not so with whatever we would call this no-fly zone over Ukraine. The other thing we need to think about is how expensive it is. Right? Tankers airborne at all times. Fighters are thirsty, especially things like Super Hornets and F-35s and Eagles and Strike Eagles. I mean, we had upwards of 10 airplanes on the wing of, Route Strawberry or whatever over Saudi and Gutter. So, bang off the front of the carrier in CVOP area 3, first thing hit the tanker and your plane cracked a whip. And this thing's doing this 10-mile racetrack. So the thing that happened on my last deployment that was tragic was we did have a midair between two of our Marine Corps Hornets trying to rendezvous on the tanker at night. And so that was arguably, absent Iraqis shooting SAMs at you, the most dangerous phase of a no-fly zone.
In 1994, I think we had just come off the tanker. We're heading back in to patrol, and the AWACS gave me a traffic call, which is appreciated. Basically, it's VFR, but he gave me a traffic call. Okay, you've got a contact off your nose, right 20 degrees, 20 miles. Maybe it's inside that. And so I locked it up on my radar, and I got a single target track. And so I'm looking over my right nose there, and about 5 miles, I still don't see it. And then I finally do. And it's an F4. And it was a F4G. They were there at the time, Wild Weasel. And so I'm looking for his wingman. Where is that guy? So he's getting closer. I've got a wingman with me that's on my left wing. And he told me later that he sees this developing, and he just kind of wants to say something, and it's too late. I just kind of look to my right, and just at that instant, I'm looking right down the intakes of an F4. Just as my brain says, okay, that's a Phantom, he picks his nose up and goes above me and avoids mid-air collision. And there wasn't even enough time for my heart rate to get elevated. Just kind of pressed on. Oh well, another day at the office in Southern Watch.
You also mentioned, Hozer, the multiple cycles. So for us, we did upwards of 3 cycle hops. The first one was just launching, tanking, barely get in country, cap for literally like 15 minutes, go back to the tanker. And the transit there was 100 miles or more. Top off, get 5, 10K, go back in country. So you're on station time, tooth to tail, it was like maybe 1/3 to 2/3 of the admin of getting back and forth and staying fueled up and that sort of thing. So the point is there's a lot that goes into it. Further, the coordination with our Air Force brethren. My first time in Southern Watch, we had 12 midnight to 12 noon, and then the Air Force based all over the place, Qatar, Prince Sultan Air Base, Riyadh, were from 12 noon to 12 midnight. Again, we're complying with the air tasking order that's being written by our reps and their reps and that sort of thing. And it was a real coordination challenge, to provide this 24/7 no-fly zone.
And just to keep that going, as you just described, you got to, guys are going back, you got to turn them around. They're in maintenance. Guys are briefed and ready to go. And days and weeks and months on end for years. And it was a lot of wear and tear on everything. And so throughout the 90s, this was going on in 2 places, Southern Watch and Deny Flight at the same time. And there was American Air Power, sometimes carrier based, a lot of time carrier based, especially in the Persian Gulf. At a lot of wear and tear, and we treated it like combat. It was, we were completely prepared for every eventuality. We took the patches off our flight suits. We brought the things that we needed to bring with us on those hops. We took it very seriously.
So both of those no-fly zones were very effective. That's the bottom line. But as we mentioned, the predicate was local air superiority, including the integrated air defense had already been dismantled. And so, as you mentioned, Hozer, they weren't green ink combat hops, but you can see behind me my air medal on my lamp here. That's from flying 20 missions over Bosnia. And then I have a numeral 2 for flying 20 missions over Southern Watch. As you mentioned, carry bloodshed, carry a weapon, brief contingencies in the event that you either run, if you had a fuel transfer problem that you had to eject. And this is where we figured out jointness as well. So when we stepped off the line of departure with the invasion of Iraq, which rendered the no-fly zone moot, we were ready to go in terms of heavy tankers, complying with an ATO, jointness, all of those types of things.
We were ready to go because we and our generation had spent years of their lives flying over that airspace and knew it and knew the geography. and knew the threat, knew what to expect, knew the air tasking order, knew that the term, we kind of touched on this earlier, Joint Force Air Component Commander, that would be in a place like Vincenza, Italy, or
the JFAC. I
the
haven't said that
JFAC.
for years.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, and so that office where that hard charging NFO would be to help out the air wing, whatever air wing was there. We knew all that, and so that helped so much. That made it when we had to go into active combat. No kidding. That part was out. We knew how to hit the tanker. They were familiar with us. That was very helpful.
So if you think about how rigged that game is, when you go to war, you've actually flown strikes against your target for weeks, if not months prior to that. And as you talk to the guys in Vietnam and other wars previous, target recognition was always the hard part. So yes, you can do all of your mission planning, but until you actually see it for real, sometimes it doesn't look like what the intel suggested it would, and so forth and so on. So the target recognition piece, when you're getting shot at, is always the hard part. So in the case of Southern Watch turning into Iraqi freedom, as you mentioned, we were very familiar with the landscape. And in some cases, if it was a lantern mission, a precision guided drop, you may have done this exact profile dozens of times before the bubble goes up and you actually drop the munition. So that was a huge, huge advantage when actually the war got kinetic.
Same thing over Bosnia, and that was some interesting flying for me. A couple of memories of that. In the Persian Gulf and Southern Watch and with the JFAC there, there was ROE and there were procedures, okay, but a lot stricter with NATO, a lot more attention to us on our routes. We had very, you couldn't deviate by a mile off your route to get to your point coming off the tanker. My first combat flight was over Bosnia. So I go in and I'm leading a section. So I briefed, okay, we're going to go in, we're going to be moving the airplane, a little mild jinking. We don't know what's out there. So I started jinking. After about 10 minutes, I don't feel very good. I've had enough of this. So we're high. We're at a high altitude, away from most of the surface threat, and not seeing very much down there. Just kind of looking around at the topography. Parts of it are very picturesque. Another memory of flying over Sarajevo at night, and just half the lights in the city just suddenly go out, and that's an action as they're fighting down there. Another memory, I just happened to be looking in downtown Sarajevo, and I saw a flash and another flash. So I figured what I'm seeing is a muzzle flash of a cannon in a square and then impact on a building across the square. That's probably what it was. Just boom, boom. And that was again the brutal street fighting in beautiful Sarajevo. I mean, we have memories of it from the 1984 Winter Olympics, and just sad to see how it was in the mid 90s.
Yeah, that's what struck me too, because it is a very beautiful country. Mostar, beautiful river running through the center of town, and just most of the roofs were like that stucco orange tiles, and it looks like a picturesque Bavarian country. And so, as you mentioned, at night you'd see the star shells going back and forth. I remember doing a TARPS mission up by Banja Luka, and we rolled at the northwestern turn point to do a 90-degree turn heading due east, and I looked down and you could see mortars going off on the top of the hill. I mean, like, oh yeah, there is a war going on down there. Yeah. They may not be shooting at us, but they're shooting at each other, and it just seemed so tragic, and that sounds trite, but that's kind of what struck me. And at night, like I said, you'd see people shooting at each other, and it just sort of struck you that this is real. This is especially in the face of the Serbian genocide in and around Sarajevo. And that's why we were very proud to have moved them out, to have broken the siege of that city in 95. And something that I is maybe the high point in terms of real world operations for me and the operations that I was able to do. So the bottom line with respect to the Ukrainian invasion and Russia is, if we were ordered to create a no-fly zone, I mean, by we, I mean NATO, we could do it. We know how to do it. We could do it in short order. Massive effort, massive amounts of coordination. And also you introduce the potential that there is an American on Russian engagement. And so what does that do to the matrix? We could do it, but it's unduly provocative and risky. We hope this clears up some of the questions that maybe arose as a result of the live stream. As we said before, we will keep you guys posted and do other live streams when the situation on the ground warrants. It's a very dynamic situation. Even since we've done the live stream, a lot has gone on. So Hozer, as always, thank you for your time and your hard-fought expertise.
Hey, thanks, Mooch. Great to be with you as always.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode. If you're a first-time visitor, please ring the bell and become a subscriber. Give me the likes and comment. Check the links below for merch and where to get the Punks Trilogy, my first 3 books about life in a Tomcat squad, are now available as a Kindle, so check that out at Amazon.com. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon below, or become a patron at patreon.com/WardCarroll. In the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again soon.